7, my father died. I didn't go to the funeral. And I didn't go to the funerals that subsequently happened in my family. Then when I was 25, my mother died, and finally I did go to a funeral. But like most people, my involvement in it was pretty minimal, really. It was performed by a vicar, a funeral director, and his bearers for elderly men in ill-fitting suits who were looking more upset than we were, which was surprisingly creepy. And their role, which was to carry and lower my mum's coffin, meant that they acted as a sort of hybrid between removal men and bouncers, because they physically excluded us from what was actually happening.
So this experience is pretty common. Loads of us still have a religious service, even though we have no belief. Most of us still end up down the creme. And it's really easy to give your power away to blokes in suits. So we'd like to talk a bit about how we've been helping families for the last 16 years to bury and cremate their dead using a stripped-back, involved approach that draws more on punk and rave and crop circles than faux Victoriana. You know, we've discarded dignity and professionalism as even things to aim for, and replaced it with honesty and appropriateness and participation.
So for us, this started with reading the Natural Death Handbook, a book that argued for reclaiming death from professionals in the same way that birth had been. It showed us that anyone could become funeral directors, and it confirmed that a lot of what was currently on offer was out of taste with public belief. It's revolutionary stuff. It argues for you to take responsibility for a death in your family and the rituals that surround it. It completely radicalised us, and it began to unfreeze my own grief. Here is a picture of the 5th edition, and like a lot of good things in life, it's not available from Amazon. So buy it directly from the charity itself, the Natural Death Centre. Buy it before someone in a multinational reads it and understands that it is a manual to dismantle the current funeral model using a cardboard coffin and a tatty old Volvo.
So its message is simple. You don't need a funeral director, and you don't need a vicar. And you can be buried in your back garden, should you so wish. You see, the thing is, dead bodies are nowhere near as tricky as the big funeral court would have you believe. You can't hurt them. They just need to be kept cool. You can disrespect them, but they are beyond pain. You can touch them and dress them and thank them, and if you think you have the authority, shout at them. But, you know, dealing with dead bodies is just a small part of this job, and it's holding the living in all the complicated dynamics of the modern family, which is the harder bit. And there's no amount of legislation that's going to teach you how to be with a mother who's lost her child, or a child, adult child, who's lost their mother. It's about being emotionally involved and present. It's about being prepared to step into a zone that is unstable and unpredictable. And everything that we have learnt about this, we have learnt from the bereaved, from the families who've been brave and generous enough to let us into their grief. And we've taken something from each family and used it to help the next, and we're profoundly grateful to them all.
So reading this book showed us a space somewhere in between the multinational corporations, the small independent funeral directors, the church and the atheists, and so we moved in and occupied it. And when we got there, we discovered there was very good reason, because the world of funerals had changed a lot since it was dealt with by the women of the village. Something mystical at the heart of what it is to be human has just become reduced to commerce. Huge corporations with underpaid, overworked staff run around centralised warehouse mortuaries churning out identical packaged funerals. They try and corner the future market, our deaths, by pushing prepayment schemes that emotionally manipulate us and our children using guilt and fear. It's become about appearance and branding. It's become completely disconnected. Most of us still settle for ceremonies that don't really reflect our beliefs because come the inevitable and we're once again gripped by that paralysis of grief, where we fall back on tired rituals because we don't have the emotional energy to look for change. And too often, when we do find an alternative, it's deceptively shallow. There's style and emotion, though to be honest, that's sometimes sentiment disguised as emotion. But the real protagonist, death, and what we have to learn from it, has disappeared along with religion.
There's so much missing from the modern traditional funeral and its humanist successor. There's so much that's not said, that's there. You know, there's never any anger there. We gloss over their faults. You know, our very understandable desire just to get through it means that we compromise on what we bring to it, and we're terrified of breaking down in public in case we can't stop or we're embarrassing. And so we go with the celebrant who wants to celebrate their life before we've even had a chance to mourn the fact that they're dead. You know, let's dress it up in bright colours and release some balloons. Because everything that's present in the emotional field when someone dies, you know, the humour and the romance, regret, the love and the pain and the fury, can all too easily be distilled down into something really unobtrusive and bland, just so as not to frighten or upset anyone. Because, you know, grieving mothers are really hard to be around. You know, their pain is so raw. So we let our poets and our pop stars speak for us instead. We play loud music instead of shouting. We buy huge bunches of flowers instead of screaming. And we're robbing ourselves by doing this, because sometimes at a funeral ritual, a temporary crucible of healing can open up, and there's an opportunity to say important things because just for a moment, everyone's open and listening, and we feel that we have an obligation to say important things.
So as you might have guessed by now, we have strong feelings about all of this. So here's what we do differently. We dress normally. We don't feel that arriving in a suit is a good way to set you at your ease. We don't use that face. We don't pretend to be overcome with grief ourselves. I mean, we do often cry with a family, but that's once a relationship has become established. We don't have a fleet of fancy cars. The so-called dignity of too many funerals is judged and measured by the smooth arrival of 90 grand's worth of shiny hearse. This is our Volvo. When we're not doing funerals in it, it's our family car. We don't embalm. In fact, we're vehemently opposed to embalming. The chemicals involved are horrendously dangerous. The procedure is violent and unnecessary and would horrify you if you could see it, but for us, the real damage lies in what it does to a body psychologically. It takes somebody who is naturally dead and turns them into a weirdly lifelike mannequin. You look absurdly healthy, and this can set off cognitive dissonance that can rattle down through your grief for years to come. And it's also been a way of perpetuating this myth that bodies are dangerous and that people also can't handle seeing the body of someone they love naturally dead. This is the complete opposite of our experience. When someone you love dies, the head and the heart are often in disagreement. The head understands or pretends to, it repeats the facts like a stutter, but the heart rebels at such an outrage, however unconscious that may be. By seeing the person as they actually are, naturally dead, not fussed over and made up, it can reset the head and the heart like a broken bone.
So this is the body of an old woman exactly as she was. Her name is Betty, and to her family, she'd been lost to Alzheimer's for over a decade. Her body was like a twisted old root. But this was a body that had once been strong and dependable, nurturing and safe. She'd birthed 3 women. And now that she was dead, this is all they had. So they spent an afternoon gently washing her body, reminiscing, reclaiming her from her long illness. They took her back. And this, in essence, is what we do. We hold a space for people to take back ownership of their dead. And this isn't always filled with love and beauty. It can be angry and bitter as well. But the art lies in giving people the time and the space to figure out what it is that they need to do. Because the funeral can then just be the kind of final act. The big work has been done in this liminal time in between by uncovering the real nature of the person that's died and their relationship to the living, by feeling for the truth of their lives, whether they're a sad, abused and abusive, violent alcoholic or a loving and contented, fulfilled grandmother. Everyone deserves to be seen clearly at the end. Everyone deserves to have their life story told. And we do this by slowing it down, by gently bringing families into the presence of the body, by listening to the spaces in between their words, and by refusing to rush or push them.
Creating new ceremonies from scratch is daunting, but it's become necessary. Our churches are emptying. Most vicars have become harassed administrators covering up to 6 parishes at a time. They just don't have the energy to fully support a bereaved family. Our crematoriums are failing us as well, environmentally, spiritually, socially, and financially. Yet still, 73% of us use their pinched 20-minute slots, hurrying out of one door while a family waits at the other for the arrival of the shiny car. We have to find a way that doesn't take just 20 minutes and doesn't replace the traditional funeral with a secular alternative.
So again, our way is simple. Once you've got rid of the signifiers of control of the modern traditional funeral, the weird stripy trousers, the shiny cars, the chipboard coffin with plastic handles that you cannot use so that you have to have bearers, we're left with something really simple that we have to do together. Carry a coffin with a body inside, feeling the weight of it as we carry them from the car into the crematorium or to the lip of the grave, feeling the lowering straps as they slip through our fingers as we lower them back into the earth. Because this is as real as it gets. And by involving yourself in these practicalities, the meaning comes with the doing. Because death is at the heart of what it means to be human. And there's a greeting common around the world: I see you. And this is what we hope to say over the bodies of these human beings that have died. We see you, your strengths and weaknesses, the light and the shadow, all your glorious humanity.
So here's what we want to change. Everything. The how, the where, and the why. We want to take crematoriums and redesign them and turn them into temples. We want to take their technology and replace it with new technology like alkaline hydrolysis that uses no fossil fuels and has no emissions.
We want to burn people on funeral pyres again like ancient Britons. We want to bury people in shallow graves so that we return to useful nutrients. We want to stop grinding our bones down into that horrible cement-like dust. I want to have the right to hold my husband's skull in my hand. I want to be sitting around a fire as the sun goes down, and I want to still be there if needs be when the sun comes up. We can be our own priests.
We believe in creating new rituals. Let me give an example. One of the most moving conclusions to a funeral that we've been involved in was designed and carried out by the 11-year-old son of the woman who died. Her illness meant that she'd been unable to communicate for the last few months of her life, but her son had come in to see her every day after school, to talk to her about his life and to read to her as she had read to him when he was little. She died before he finished the book. His committal, his final ritual act, was to pull up a chair beside her grave and to take out that book and to read her the last 3 pages. When he'd finished it, he shut it and he stood up with his father and he picked up a shovel and he filled in his mother's grave. It was one of the most profound experiences of my life, and I know that anyone who's there will not forget it, and it cannot be replicated. Now, we've put up this photo because we believe that we impose our own meaning on the world. We literally create the world in front of us. That's not the same as saying that life is meaningless. It's saying that we have an obligation to interpret it ourselves. Death is an incredible creative and spiritual opportunity because nobody really knows what it means or what it's about. And I'm not talking about organising your own funeral or even deciding the manner in which you'd like to die. I'm talking about the right to dive through a spiritual portal of your own design, created by your heart and your imagination. Because what have we got to lose? If we jump and it's not real, it doesn't matter. It's done its job. We've made our transition.
Take it back. All of it. Right through to the afterlife. Because if they haven't got death over us, what have they got?
Thank you.
Thank you.